Aldrin, what do you make of what we've seen thus far?
Well, I guess the most important thing to come out of this proceedings after the tea break is a question around whether the Speaker of Parliament has an obligation to conduct a motion of no confidence via secret ballot, or does she have discretion, because this is another issue. And you listen to Anton Katz, who was representing the IFP, saying that under this particular matter, which the court is currently hearing, the Speaker of Parliament must be obligated to have a vote of no confidence be voted on via a secret ballot, and that's the debate that's currently underway. And the issue as well, which was raised earlier on by Dali Mpofu, was around the intimidation of ANC MPs, which Chief Justice Mogoeng said even earlier on this morning that this is something that shouldn't be considered at this point. Rather, what the court should be doing is looking into interpreting Section 102 of the Constitution, and of course Section 57 of the Constitution, which gives Parliament the powers to decide on its own rules with regards to this. And Mogoeng really stressing this yet again, even with Ngugaitobi, who's representing the EFF, that they as the court must be cautious around the issues around separation of powers, because Section 57 of the Constitution does give the Parliament powers in terms of making up its own rules, but those rules of course must be consistent with the Constitution. I think a very important question that was raised by Justice Khampepe is the question around openness when it comes to democracy, and this was something that was raised in an opinion piece as well by political analyst Stephen Friedman, where he speaks about democracy and the pillars of democracy, and one of those pillars being transparency, one of those pillars being openness and being accountable. And how could one argue that MPs are accountable when they're allowed to make such an important decision on the future of a sitting president by doing that via a vote of no confidence, through a secret vote of no confidence? And one thing that we need to understand as well is that in terms of Section 102, subsection 2 of the Constitution, should the president be removed via a vote of no confidence, a motion of no confidence rather, then that would mean that the entire executive must also step down. And I'm just looking at some of the reaction that some people have had on Twitter, and they are arguing that this means that the opposition parties really want the ANC to destroy itself, considering that if you have a situation where all ANC MPs who are currently members of the executive, who are ministers as well as deputy ministers, would have to resign at the end of a secret ballot against the president.
Aldrin, we've seen those lawyers being given quite a tough time by Mogoeng and the other justices. What's expected after lunch? What happens from here?
Well, after lunch, we'll continue hearing some of the submissions, especially from the friends of the court as well. We have Kasak that has applied to be a friend of the court, and they will also advance some of the arguments. And I guess some of the issues that will be raised is, of course, around the motion of no confidence in terms of a secret ballot being conducted, and whether the Speaker of Parliament does have discretion, or whether she is obligated. You know, when you look at the last argument that was made by Anton Katz, for instance, Anton speaks about the secret ballot and saying that it must be motions of no confidence against motions of no confidence that are being heard or debated in Parliament must all be voted on via a secret ballot. What that essentially means as well, it means that the same could apply for the Speaker of Parliament, because remember that the case that has been quoted during this court case, the Tlaumela case, which was the Ahang case, where Ahang went to court where they wanted the Speaker of Parliament to conduct a motion of no confidence in her to be done secretly, and of course they were unsuccessful in that matter. And if this court then decides that interpreting Section 102 of the Constitution and the absence of whether by vote it means secret ballot or by vote it means open ballot, if the court then decides that the Speaker of Parliament has discretion around that, that would mean that the Speaker of Parliament will have the final say around whether there will be a vote of no confidence against the president being done through a secret ballot.
Aldrin, the stakes are very high, depending what perspective you're looking at this case from. Are there any high-profile politicians, members of the ruling party, or opposition members?
Well, certainly, stakes are quite high. We have the leaders of the opposition party who were also leading a march all the way from Mary Fitzgerald Square here to Constitutional Hill, led by the likes of the EFF's leader, Julius Malema, Musi Maimane, also part of the people listening into this case. The ANC itself is not party to this case, and this is an issue that was raised by Advocate Dali Mpofu, who is representing the UDM, saying that the application that has been brought by the UDM, they do cite the ANC as one of the respondents. I think about 13 respondents that have been listed, including all opposition parties in Parliament, and the ANC decided not to file any papers responding to the UDM's argument. However, President Jacob Zuma, filing and responding to these arguments, responded in his capacity as president of the country, that means president of South Africa as well as president of the ANC, and they are arguing, because the president is arguing or advancing arguments on behalf of the ANC, the president should be personally held liable for all cost implications with regards to this case. He should be paying from his own pocket, because he's not only advancing arguments in his capacity as president of the country alone, but also in his capacity as president of the ANC, because in his heads of arguments he speaks about the responsibility that a political party holds in terms of making sure that its party members toe the party line, that the constitution of the ANC, the president says in his heads of argument, is not an issue that is being discussed. It's not something that is being challenged at this point. He even cites the IFP and the DA and the EFF, saying all three of those political parties have their own disciplinary procedures when it comes to the conduct of its members in Parliament. And I guess that's quite a critical question as well. At which point does a member of Parliament cease to be a party member, and more specifically their vote according to the conscience, which was an argument that was made earlier on. But does that conscience then mean that you do not toe the political line? That means that you sit down as a member of Parliament and decide what would be in the interest of the country and not so much in the interest of the ANC or the political party that you represent at that point.
Aldrin, before we let you go, remind us when this motion is to be debated, when the vote will be held, and how quickly is the Constitutional Court itself expected to come to a decision after hearing arguments?
Well, this has been brought on an urgent basis, certainly, and we can see that the court is also taking this matter quite seriously. In the first week of April, that's when the UDM decided to bring this case to the court. Remember, that was after the President Jacob Zuma decided to reshuffle the cabinet, and they wanted to push a vote of no confidence against the president. But they wanted the Speaker of Parliament to do so to allow a secret ballot, and she had argued that the Constitution, as it stands, doesn't allow for a secret ballot of a motion of no confidence against the president. And that's the reason that we are here, considering that application was brought in the first week of April. Now we are in May, and the arguments are being heard. It points to the fact that this case is being heard on the basis of being urgent. The Constitutional Court quite certainly taking this matter seriously as well. If you compare, for instance, to a court case that has been brought, the application that has been brought by the EFF against the Speaker of Parliament, in where they want the Speaker of Parliament, they want this court rather to force the Speaker of Parliament to hold the President accountable post the Nkandla ruling, where this court found that the president failed to uphold, protect and defend the Constitution. That matter has not been heard, but this one, certainly there is that sense of urgency, and also considering that the motion of no confidence against the president was planned to have been heard on the 18th of April. However, though, it was extended after the opposition parties asked for postponement pending the outcome of this court case. So we'll certainly have to wait and see how long the Constitutional Court justices will take up until they come to a final determination.